Okay, so get this. You have this brilliant, top-of-the-line AI teacher. You set it up to train a new student AI, and you expect greatness, right? But the opposite happens. The student actually gets dumber. A lot dumber. So how on earth can a smarter teacher create a worse student? That's the bizarre mystery we're getting into today.
So the method at the heart of all this is called on-policy distillation, or OPD for short. You can think of it like having a personal tutor for an AI. The student model tries to figure out a problem by itself, and the whole time, the expert teacher AI is basically looking over its shoulder, giving it feedback step by step. In theory, it should be an amazing way to pass on knowledge.
And this is where things get really weird. Take a look at this graph. That dotted red line way up top, that's our super smart teacher. It's performing great. But look at the solid red line below it. That's the student's performance. And it's absolutely cratering. The student is literally getting worse the more it's taught. It just makes no sense, right?
And this brings us to what we're calling the AI teacher paradox. It seems like there are some hidden rules to this game, and it's not as simple as just grabbing the smartest AI off the shelf. So let's start digging and figure out what those rules are.
This whole thing really begs the question. If it's not about raw intelligence or how well the teacher scores on a test, then what actually makes for a good AI teacher? Well, the research points to two very specific and maybe surprising conditions that have to be met.
And here they are. It turns out success really hinges on two things. First, the teacher and student need to have consistent thinking patterns. They have to be on the same wavelength. They have to vibe. And second, the teacher has to offer genuinely new information, not just a slightly better version of what the student could have learned on its own.
And check this out. This case study just nails that first point. Researchers took two teachers with pretty much the same skill level. Teacher A's thinking was a lot like the student's. Teacher B's was different. And the result? Teacher A, the one that was more compatible, was a way better teacher. The takeaway? Alignment can seriously trump raw power.
Now for that second condition, bringing something new to the table. In another experiment, a huge 7 billion parameter model tried to teach a smaller 1.5 billion model from the same AI family. Now the teacher was objectively better, but the student gained nothing. Zero improvement. Why? Because they were both fed a similar diet of training data. The teacher didn't have any new tricks up its sleeve, it was just a little bit better at the same old ones.
Okay, so we've got the what. You need aligned thinking and new knowledge. But what about the how? What's actually happening under the hood? We're starting to see that it's not just about what the teacher knows. It's all about how it thinks. And that is the key to cracking this whole code.
And after all that, the actual mechanism is really kind of elegant. It all boils down to one single thing: tracking the agreement between the teacher and the student on a tiny, tiny scale.
And that's where this idea of token overlap comes in. See, an AI generates text by predicting the next word, or token. Token overlap is just a simple measurement of how often the teacher and the student agree on what the most likely next words are. Think of it like a real-time mind meld score that shows how aligned their thinking is from moment to moment.
All right, so we've got this fancy term token overlap, but what does that actually look like in practice? Can we physically see the difference it makes when a training session is going well versus, well, when it's totally falling apart?
Oh yeah, we can. This graph right here is the smoking gun. That red line shows a successful run. See how it just keeps climbing and climbing? Well, that climb perfectly mirrors the token overlap, which is also growing. They're learning to think alike. But that blue line, that's our failing student. It's completely flat. The token overlap never grows. There's just no connection, so there's no learning.
Now this is the part that just blows my mind. It turns out that this tiny little sliver of agreement, these overlapping tokens, carries almost all the important information. We're talking 97 to 99% of the actual signal for learning is packed right into that small moment of agreement. Incredible.
So this discovery, it's not just a cool observation. It's the playbook. It tells us exactly how these tiny, micro-level agreements between AIs can stack up and lead to massive breakthroughs in learning.
Okay, so if this token overlap is the secret sauce, what do we do with that information? What if you have a teacher and a student and they're just not clicking? Their token overlap is in the gutter. Can you fix it? Can you force them to get along?
Well, it turns out the answer is a big yes. The researchers didn't just diagnose the problem. They actually developed a rescue plan. It's a practical, two-step recipe for success to get that failing student back on track.
And here it is. Step 1 is what they call an off-policy cold start. It's basically like giving the student a cheat sheet. You let it peek at the teacher's final answers before the real training even begins. This just gets their brains on the same wavelength from the get-go. Then, for step 2, you use teacher-aligned prompts. That just means you ask the student questions that you already know the teacher is a total rockstar at answering. That way, you guarantee the feedback is going to be reliable and super high quality.
All right, so this all sounds amazing, right? We've got the problem, we've got the fix. So is this it? Is on-policy distillation the magic bullet, the ultimate solution for training AI? Well, hang on a second. It's not quite that simple.
Because, there's almost always a catch. It turns out this style of learning has a hidden cost. This super intense step-by-step supervision is powerful, for sure, but it isn't a silver bullet, and it looks like it has its limits.
And this chart shows something really fascinating. There's a Goldilocks zone for this kind of learning. On short tasks, performance is kind of low, not enough time to get into a groove. On medium-length tasks, boom, that's the sweet spot, peak performance. But then, look what happens when the problems get really long and complex. The performance actually starts to decline again.
The researchers in the paper put it perfectly. They said this reveals a fundamental tension between supervision density and supervision reliability. Now let's unpack what that actually means, because it's a really big deal.
Okay, so imagine the student is working its way down this long, winding road of logic. The further it travels on its own, the more likely it is to take a creative turn that the teacher has never even considered. It's basically exploring uncharted territory. And at that point, the teacher's step-by-step advice, which is based on the path it knows, starts to become, well, less helpful. It can even become bad advice.
And that really leaves us with the next huge challenge, doesn't it? We started with this weird puzzle about a smart teacher failing a student. We found out it's all about thinking alike. But it all leads to an even bigger question for the future. As we ask AI to solve problems that we ourselves can't, how do we build teachers that are wise enough to guide them without holding them back? How do you teach a student that's destined to become smarter than you?